Course.
Hi, everybody. As Eric says, my name is Christina Fillmore, and I'm a data scientist here at GSK. But today, I'm not coming here in the capacity as GSK. Instead, I'm coming here in the capacity as the co-lead to CAMIS, or Comparing Analysis Method Implementations in Software. Yes, it's a mouthful. That's why we always call it CAMIS. But if you've been at this conference all week, you may have heard it vaguely referenced to a little bit earlier. I think they referenced it in the R validation talk, which was great. But what is it? So before I get too far in telling you more about what exactly is CAMIS, let me talk through a little bit of the motivation of why CAMIS. So the motivation is going to be something like this. Say I'm a statistician, and as a statistician, because before I was a data scientist, I was a run-of-the-mill statistician. Not that there is a run-of-the-mill statistician, but you know what I mean. I was like working on studies, doing things. And occasionally I'd get asked to be doing QC. So I'd probably get something in a SAP that looked something like this, that maybe said, using a log rank test to determine the association between survival time and atrial fibrillation. Additionally, calculate Kaplan-Meier estimates of survival time using Cox proportional hazard, and maybe get some hazard ratios as well as confidence intervals. And I might even, if I'm lucky, get a table that looks something like this that tells me, hey, you know, we want this Kaplan-Meier estimate over here, and we want some of this stuff over here in a Cox proportional hazard model. So I'd look at that and go, great. I am a person who grew up learning R, well, grew up, but as a statistician, in grad school, I learned how to do all of my survival models in R as opposed to SAS. And I work at a company that really encourages us to use whatever language feels most natural to us. So I'm going to choose R to do my analysis in, which is great. Now I'm going to start to do my analysis. So the first thing I do is I start with the Kaplan-Meier estimates, just because they're at the top of the page. And I have some quantiles for those, and everything's looking good. I get out some results. These seem good. And when I start to compare the results, it looks like the quantile estimates are what I wanted. But unfortunately, there's some NAs, and there wasn't NAs in the data set that I was given that was generated by SAS. And also, all of the like 95% confidence intervals on these quantiles, they don't match at all. Well, some of them do, but oftentimes they're off not a huge amount, but enough that I can't pass them without knowing at least why. Now, before I get into that problem, let me just continue to move on. Maybe it will get better as I go through the rest of the analysis I need to do. So I am going to get my p-value out. That one's all good. That one matches. So maybe it was a fluke. Maybe it was just something with the confidence intervals. I know that I'll have to look into that in order to pass it in the QC, but let me continue to go on, and I continue to go on and fit my Cox proportional hazard model. In my Cox proportional hazard model, again, get my estimates out. Everything seems to be working just perfectly, except for, again, my confidence intervals don't match. So what do I do? Well, being the good R person I am, the first thing I do is I read the documentation for survival. Now, I don't really want to be sitting here reading a bunch of documentation, but as I review everything, everything seems fine. I did what I was asked of by the SAP that I was given. The SAP told me to run these models. I ran the models. That's what I did. Then I look at the SAS documentation. Maybe the SAS documentation will explain to me why there's a difference. And I'm running out of time. I really do need to get this done. I have a lot of stuff to do, but where am I going to turn? Why are they different? And what am I going to do next? Well, that's kind of where CAMIS comes in. The point of CAMIS is to look at these comparisons of methods, implementations, and to try and help people when, honestly, you want to know why they're different without having to necessarily read all the documentation. So although we have implementations in R and SAS, and we also do comparisons. So I'm going to look through, there's a table at the top, table on the front page of CAMIS, and in that table, it has a sections called Kaplan-Meier, log rank, tests, and Cox proportional hazard. Great, I can look at that comparison page. And when I see there's a reason, the reason is that the defaults are different, or the reason is the difference is the default method of handling ties for the Cox model, and the confidence interval calculations for the Kaplan-Meier estimates are just different. So, okay, great. It oftentimes does come down to these defaults. So even though what I put in was both very correct and correct according to the SOP, the defaults meant that I was doing things that I didn't necessarily realize I had intentionally chosen. And that's oftentimes how we have it. So in this case, what I need to do to get things to match is in my Cox proportional hazard model, I need to change the tie handling from Efron to Breslow. Both of options are available in both R and SAS. So it's just what the default is. And they produce a lot of things that are identical, but occasionally you're getting these like slight differences, which means that you're not going to have a numeric match. And that's why I was struggling with getting things to match, right? And so either one is fine. And honestly, Breslow is maybe older than Efron. Efron does a little bit better when there's a large number of ties. That's why it's the default in R, but because Breslow is a bit older and there's backwards compatibility stuff, that's why SAS uses that. Breslow, both of them are fine. They're not a problem. And if there's a small number of ties, they produce the same number. But this case, I didn't have a small number of ties. I had big enough that it caused a problem. And something similar happens with my confidence intervals. Basically, by default, SAS calculates log, and R calculates log. Both of them are good and decent choices, but because the SAP didn't specify which one I chose, I used the default, and it turns out the defaults are slightly different in R and SAS. So that's kind of where CAMIS comes in. So hello, I'm here to talk about CAMIS. I told you I'd talk to you about it today. And what is it? So as I said before, it's the comparing analysis method implementations in software. It's a cross-industry collaboration formed of members from a variety of different statistical and programming associations, such as PHUSE, PSI, IASCT, and the ASA. We really welcome anyone who wants to contribute, though. But we do our primary organization we sit under is PHUSE as the Davos working group. So what were our aims? Our first aim was to create a white paper. The goal of the white paper was really to think about these problems and how do we get around them and what do we need to do as kind of an industry that's moving towards a lot of different technologies. How do we stop these problems from happening when we're doing QC on the SAC and we're just trying to get it done and now there's a deadline and we're all doing it right then? And how do we take all that stuff off the critical path? That was the goal of kind of the white paper. And then the next aim was to create a GitHub repository to store all of the and to help build up a library of the differences that we do see in different methodologies, in different languages, and to help document why they happen and maybe help a little bit to see if it can be resolved. Sometimes there isn't a single resolvable solution, and it might just be you're never going to get the same number, but this is the reason why. And that's really important information to know as well. So let me start with the first aim. The first aim was to create this white paper, which we did in July of this year. Sorry, I can't remember. And it's called The Key Considerations of When Understanding Differences in Statistical Methodological Implementation Across Programming Language, an Introduction to the CAMIS Project. We do love a long acronym here. And so basically, as I said, one of the key components of this white paper is to talk about how do we ensure that we're clearly defining in our SAPs enough information that we're not going to be reliant on a single software. So first you have to define the research question, and then you have to try to define the statistical design to examine that question, think about it as your methodologies and things like that. And then you need to make sure you're looking at technical aspects like differences in documentations or assumptions or values, parameters, because they're all going to be different in potentially different softwares, and you need to make sure that you're supplying enough information. So it's kind of like, think about if you go up to maybe a pizza shop and say, I would like a pizza, they're just going to look at you a bit funny. Describing a pizza, although is a great way to describe what to have for dinner, isn't enough information to tell you what kind of pizza you should have. Is it going to be a pepperoni pizza or a Hawaiian pizza or a vegetarian pizza? You don't know. If you ask for a pizza, who knows what you're going to get? Until you define enough levels of information, like what sauce, what toppings you want, or in this case, how you want to handle your ties, or how you want to handle the confidence intervals, you're not going to be able to have a language agnostic analysis. So our goal really with the SAPs should be to deliver enough detail that somebody could reproduce the analysis just from the SAP without having to have the code as well. And they could potentially reproduce that in whatever language they wanted to and still get the same result. Or at least know maybe they're not going to be able to do it in that language because that language doesn't do whatever type of tie handling or, estimate you're looking for. So that's the first goal that we did. The next thing that we really focused on was building out this repo. So the repo sits under the PSI AIMS repo, which is the kind of R, SIG, and PSI. As I said, it is kind of a cross-collaboration group, so stuff is a little bit scattered. But when you come to this repo, the first thing you're probably going to want to do is look at the website. So we did build a website, and what is it? Well, it's a Quarto-based website. So it's pretty simple, which makes it really great because it's easy to contribute to. But the first page has a big long table that has a bunch of different statistical methods that you might want to be looking at. For instance, everything from rounding to the Kaplan-Meier that we looked at before. And most things are somewhat filled in. Some things only have SAS examples, like with the student's t-test. Some things, like the ANCOVA, only have R examples. And some things, like maybe rounding or the summary stats, have both. But let's just say you came in and you were looking for quantiles. Well, quantiles isn't in the list. I can tell you right now, quantiles isn't in the list. So if the case you don't see something, you can always go into the top corner, and there's a big little, like a magnifying glass, and you can click that. The magnifying glass brings you to a lovely little search bar that allows you to search through all of the content on the website. So that really makes it so it's pretty usable, well, I know I'm going to say that as somebody who helped build it, but we find it's pretty usable, and most people are able to find the things that they're looking for. But there's still a lot of ways to go. We do need more contributions. So how might one contribute, or how might one see the code directly? Because it's a Quarto website, we don't have a lot of rules, I guess, of like how it needs to be structured. So it's pretty straightforward. If you wanted to add a comparison, an information about R or information about SAS, all you need to do is to go into one of these folders, either called comp R or SAS, depending on what you're looking for, to potentially add that information in, or get the code directly out if you didn't want to go through the website for some reason and you wanted the Quarto document itself. So that's kind of like what CAMIS is and why we're here. But why am I here today? Part of it is a call for action, and really to ask you, please, we do need your help. We have gathered to the best of our ability a bunch of different stats methods, but there are so many stats methods out that we need our community as a whole to work together to do this. So what do we need? We need things like documenting how to perform different methods in R, SAS, or how to the comparison of what happens when you do them in both and you get different answers. We also need things, as I said, adding to those to the repository about differences in R and SAS that you know about. Even if it's just saying, I know that this is an issue that exists and I don't know why it happens, that's valuable information for us. It allows us to to know what we need to examine first and help prioritize things to look at. The next thing is also adding content for other languages. We're totally open to including things like Python and Julia and other softwares. We'd love to see more software represented. We've stuck with R and SAS because that's the languages that we use the most. There wasn't really any rhyme or reason to say we only are going to use R, we're only going to use SAS. It just happens to be what we're most comfortable in and have been using for analysis. But anyone here who's like, I really love Julia and I want to add in a bunch of Julia's content, we would love that. The final thing is that we also need to just people to look at what's there. So if you happen to be reading some content and you're like, I don't understand this thing is spelled wrong, or I have a better way of explaining this, we would still love to have any of that sort of content as well. You can contribute to us just by doing a pull request. You can fork the repo, do a pull request in, or you can join us. We are, as I said, a FUSE working group, and we meet once a month, and we would love any and all contributions. So that's about all I have today. And now I guess, any questions, Eric? Sorry.
Well, thank you, Christina. Yeah, this is something that's been a very hot topic across the networks I have, as the adoption of R and open source in general, and trying to figure out where are the key differences and how should we document those. But why not do it in a central place? It just makes perfect sense. This is really, really insightful. Yeah, so I'm scanning through the chat right now. Well, frankly, it's just a lot of great kudos to you. Someone, Kai, says this is very helpful. I don't need to take a lot of time to search on Google to look for why the models are different in R and SAS. So having this one place to go, I think, is going to be immensely helpful. So.
That's what we hope. And yeah, there's the QR code you can go, and I think Alex put in the chat. Alex is also involved in this effort. And I just cannot thank everyone enough for everyone who has contributed, and do please contribute. We do need more stuff, basically. The more we have, the better it will be. I think is the primary goal of this talk. Please come help us. We're nice. Unfortunately, we don't actually have pizza.
Well, you can't have everything, right? But yeah, we do have time for maybe a couple more. But Jared has more of an observation here, or perhaps question. But as future packages are developed in this space, will these address kind of the issues for consistency between certain measures? Or do you think it's more of documenting these issues and not so much trying to solve the issues per se?
From what we've seen from like a broader perspective, from like, I guess, a top-down view, as someone who I do read a lot of the pull requests, so I know what comes through. A lot of it is defaults. Like, more than anything, it's default settings. It's not necessarily like this thing doesn't go with this thing. But Jared, to your point, there's definitely new things that have been brought in. Like the MMRM package is a really great example, where the MMRM package, just prior to the MMRM package, you couldn't get some of the covariance structures you wanted to do, kind of that sort of repeated measure model in R. It just really wasn't available. But now it's there. I think, I'm not sure it's been added to CAMIS yet. I think we're talking to the authors. I think they're about to add it in. But things like that can be really helpful. And yeah, if you write an R package that solves a problem like this, do please add the information into the repo. The goal really is to try and keep it as centralized as possible. That's why also we're across so many different organizations, from India to the US, and trying to span the globe a lot to make sure that we do kind of all contribute to the same place, rather than have 15 different repos that all name maybe 5 things that are kind of a problem, but don't cover all the same 5 things or something like that. So.
Yeah, I can speak at least for myself at my organization. We do have some internal documentation that have been started by some really innovative statisticians and programmers on some of these rounding differences. But yeah, we don't want to keep those in silos. We'd love to share that and see if that's already been solved already in CAMIS, or if there's some additional information we can get in there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the FUSE working group. Is that the best place to get involved directly, or
you can, I mean, if you want to get involved directly, feel free to contact me, and I will send you an invite to the monthly meeting. You can also easily just fork the repo and add whatever you want to do in and do a pull request. Me or my co-lead, Lynn, will also review it. So we definitely do that sort of stuff. I think there's a lot of ways to get involved. You can contact me, but you can go through FUSE. There's many options. I think for the most part, we're just trying to pull stuff together. And so we try to limit meetings that are, I think the biggest meeting most of our meeting is to just discuss conferences we're talking at, like this one, which I'm very thankful that you guys let me talk at. So I think that's all I have.
Yep.
I think it's about time. I almost hit time perfectly with questions. Thanks for asking questions.
No, very, very, very awesome, Christina. It's great to have you back to our pharma. And yeah, we hope to see more involvement in CAMIS in the future. So thanks so much.